Update: am I the asshole for not telling my parents that the event they were missing was my wedding? Original post. Buckle up, guys. This will be kinda long. So I, 27 female, have a younger brother, Mike, 21 male. He is the definition of a man-child and a mama's boy, always complaining, always expecting others to bow to him. Just overall, an asshole. Ever since he was born, my parents fussed over him for everything. He's not special needs or had a traumatic birth or anything of the sort. He was just born. And my parents completely discarded me. My mum, 50 female, especially. She went from a loving mother to one of those boy mums that people make fun of on the internet. My father, 50 male, still showed me love and support. But he's always been too much of a coward to stand up to my mother and let me win at least once. The only one who stood up for me was my grandpa, 76 male, who always called my parents out on their bullshit and never liked my brother. I remind him of his late wife, my grandma, and we have a very special bond, and he lives on the other side of the country, and I could never see him often. Mike knows our mum prefers him, and he loves to shove it in my face. Because of this and his behaviour, we've always been at odds. He's a spoiled brat and an awful human. I can't remember how many times I ended up in trouble for things I did better than him or for things he framed me with. His only talent are his football skills. He won a scholarship to a nice college out of state. My parents didn't spend a dime on my education because apparently my fund had been used to cover expenses after a fire, just for me to discover years later that said money were given to Mike to buy a car and a house. It's at a public university that I met Lucas. He was the first person I was really drawn to there. Of course, I met new people who are now my dearest friends, and thanks to them and Lucas, who was my best friend for years before we got together, I managed to move out of my parents' house. Now, both Lucas and I are well known in our fields and have very good salaries. Now, to the main issue. Lucas proposed to me a year ago. We're very private people, so we didn't post it on social media or anything like that. And when I told my parents, they dismissed it with a, "That's nice." I'm starting to think they downright didn't listen to me at all. We decided that we wanted a nice but simple ceremony and reception with our friends and relatives. Lucas convinced me to invite my parents and brother, but they never responded to the invite. And whenever I went to visit and began to talk about my wedding, without mentioning it was a wedding, my mum would always speak over me and about my brother's accomplishments and wild adventures. At one point, I got fed up with it and interrupted my mum to tell her that there was an event I was planning to organise, whose date was unmovable. She told me that they couldn't attend because my brother was playing the last game of the season that very same day and wanted them to be there. Of course, this favouritism didn't surprise me. They missed my ballet shows and both my high school and university graduation for things about him. At this point, I just wanted to be petty. I told my parents that it wasn't a problem to miss this event. I purposely omitted the fact that this event was my wedding and didn't insist further. Flash forward to a few weeks ago. I got married. It was perfect. My family, Lucas's family, and our friends were all there, and we had a blast. My grandpa was happy to give me away, and it was just perfect. My relatives asked me multiple times why my parents weren't there with us. I was honest and simply said they had my brother's game to attend and couldn't come. They gave me a few looks, and my grandpa was visibly angry for a while, but otherwise, nothing strange happened. After the reception, Lucas and I left for our honeymoon and were phone-free for the whole duration of the trip. But once we got back, we discovered that a shitstorm was welcoming us home. I turned my phone on and was unable to even unlock it before a storm of notifications popped up. Most of them were from my mother and brother. Mike called me all sorts of nasty names and insulted me because, apparently, one of my paternal aunts posted the photos of the wedding on Facebook and captioned it with a very obvious dig at my parents, especially my mum, for missing the wedding. The post apparently went viral in my parents' community, and they've been publicly shamed for their mistreatment of me. It also turns out that my grandpa personally visited my parents to go on a tirade to shame my father, his son, to the point of tears. And this seemed to be my father's breaking point, because he was so distraught for missing his only daughter's wedding and for his father's disapproval that he finally rebelled against my mum and is threatening divorce unless she makes it up to me. I think that's the reason why my mum has been spamming my phone with messages, at first insulting and threatening, and then downright pitiful, full of begging and pity parties. Now I'm at home with my husband, deciding how to approach the situation. Most of my relatives, even those I didn't invite to the wedding, reached out to apologise for what I went through and to claim they had no idea this was happening at home. Can't blame any of my relatives. They all live with my grandpa on the other side of the country or in another state. But my mum's sisters and friends are belittling me for not telling my mum about the wedding, because now she's inconsolable at the thought of having missed my wedding. Personally, I think she just claims that to save face, but I'm not sure. The latest messages from my father and mother seem extremely saddened and hurt for missing my wedding. Now my family is divided on 3 fronts. The majority who are sticking by my side, my paternal aunts shaming me for hurting my mum's feelings, and my maternal grandparents who are adamant that I forgive my mum in light of her atonement. My best friends are telling me not to listen to them. So Reddit, am I the asshole? My reaction for OP. Whilst it must be heartbreaking to see your parents favour Mike over you, and also distasteful to see the way your brother reacts to you, I wonder, is there a better way to make yourself feel better? I mean, we should all have our own high standards and not allow the way we behave to be influenced by others, as this just disempowers us. Personally, I'm all for discussing difficult situations and just seeing where it leads. Edit. Thank you so much for the feedback and love. It's overwhelming. I'm going to address the popular questions here. 1. I did inform my parents about my wedding. I sent out additional paper invites to all my guests and was notified that all invites had reached their addresses. I did not receive any answer from my parents and Mike, a few very distant relatives, and some people on Lucas's side. I did reach out to all of them through message to double check, and those who hadn't replied told me they couldn't come. I asked my parents and brother via text, but they didn't respond. I was left on read. Knowing them and given all the things I had to plan, I didn't bother insisting. 2. I didn't repeat the date of my wedding because I'd already been told there was my brother's game. Plus, every time I insisted on highlighting my celebrations to get an answer, I was always told that it wasn't that important and not to be pissy and a bother, because some things were simply more important than me. At this point, I think it's fair for me to not insist anymore. It's not worth the effort. 3. I didn't keep my wedding a secret. I avoided telling my parents that it was my wedding to see if they would be interested in the slightest. But surprise, surprise, they weren't. Despite this, I did openly talk about my wedding with my aunts and uncles. My mother was in the room with us a few times when I discussed venues or dress shops with my aunt, the FB post one. But sometimes my mum was on the phone and other times she was just chatting with other people. She never paid attention. When I talked about it during reunions, she smiled and said, "That's great, dear," and then would change the subject. Radio silence on Dad and Mike. 4. I kept in contact with them because, well, all the times I tried to go NC in the past years, I've been harassed. I tried after my husband's bachelor's and master's graduations, to which they never bothered to show up for reasons involving my brother. Every time I was shamed for daring to turn my back on family by my parents, my brother, my maternal aunts, and my maternal grandparents. I think the turning point here is that at all those times, Lucas wasn't by my side. We started dating a little after my last attempt at going NC, and now that I have him here, I feel more confident in my stance. But before that, I wasn't this confident. As I already stated, all my paternal side lives on the other side of the country and wasn't aware of how they treated me. I did try to expose my parents once at 14. My uncles, aunts and grandpa reprimanded them. They faked being sorry, and then once home, I got the beating and gaslighting of my life for lying. After that, I kept in contact regularly with my paternal side, but omitting my parents' abuse out of fear, which, to be honest, still haunts me to this day. Only Grandpa knew, but he was always threatened to be alienated from me if he tried anything. 5. My parents and I are not from the same city. I live in a city an hour's drive from my parents' small town, and they don't know any new address because once my brother tried to break into my apartment to steal some cash, and my mother backed him up, claiming that siblings share their goods. Now I moved and I'll be sure not to tell them where I live. 6. My parents didn't buy my brother a car and a house before he even started high school. They bought him a car for his 16th birthday and a house near his college when he began freshman year. They didn't spend the money of my fund right away. They just lied to me to use it later for my brother, keeping it stored for later in the meantime. Now for the update. First, I want to thank everyone who showed interest in my story and sent me supportive messages. I'm truly grateful for your love and feedback. The overwhelming response was beyond anything I could have imagined, and I appreciate each one of you. To those who doubted my story's authenticity, I'm glad your family life is better than mine. But please stop harassing me in direct messages, accusing me of fabricating this for attention. If some details were missing in the original post, it's because I was overwhelmed and emotional. No one is forcing you to believe my story, but a little decency would be appreciated. Before diving into the update, let me clarify a few things. 1. The invitation clearly stated it was a wedding. 2. My maternal side of the family didn't attend the wedding. Most were busy and others just sent excuses with gifts. They didn't discuss my wedding with my mum. It's not like I live in their heads. 3. My mother's atonement was a simple text apology. Now on to the update. Things have been hectic this past week. I took a break from Reddit to gather my thoughts and had a long conversation with Lucas about how to move forward. He's been my rock, and I couldn't love him more. My parents were always a sensitive topic, but he gave me a much-needed reality check. We concluded that my continued contact with them wasn't healthy. I realized I never fully went NC because deep down, I still crave their approval. It's pathetic, I know, but that ends now. I've decided to start therapy and go completely NC with those who cause this mess. After reflecting on my feelings for a few days, I messaged my father, suggesting a meeting with him, Mum, and Mike in a neutral location. He agreed and we met at a park, with my father's siblings tagging along for damage control. My father looked distraught, my mother seemed angry and embarrassed, and my brother was just annoyed. I confronted them about their preferential treatment of my brother and their abusive behaviour, making it clear that I wanted no further contact after that meeting. My mother tried to interrupt, but my aunt shut her down every time. When I asked why they treated me this way, my father just cried and apologised without any real explanation. My mother, on the other hand, bluntly admitted she simply disliked me, and my brother confessed he enjoyed making me miserable. I also asked why they never responded to my wedding invite. They claimed they never received it, which turned out to be true. My brother had visited them that weekend, found the invite, and trashed it. He also deleted my text messages, so my parents were completely unaware of my wedding. When I confronted Mike about it, he just shrugged, saying it wasn't as important as their plans. Lucas had to restrain himself from punching him. My parents were surprisingly upset and reprimanded him. Mike threw a tantrum, crying crocodile tears, which I found oddly satisfying. But my mother then claimed all was resolved and that I should clear their name. That set me off. I told her they weren't forgiven just because Mike trashed the invite. They still should have known about my wedding. Her response? She said she thought I was being delusional and just seeking attention. She didn't believe Lucas actually liked me or would ever marry me. I was livid. Another revelation came up. My brother didn't have a football game to attend at all. My parents used our lack of football knowledge to cover up their real plans, a trip to Disneyland because Mike wanted to go. They had lied to avoid my event. Overwhelmed, I snapped. I told my father he was a weak man who couldn't stand up for his kids without his wife's approval. I called my brother a useless leech and my mother a narcissist beyond redemption. Harsh, but I meant every word. My mother tried to yell back, but I was too angry. I told her to shut up and listen for once. I barely remember what I said after that, but I know the park fell silent. I disowned them all, grabbed my things and left with Lucas and my friends. I had a panic attack on the way home, but Anna helped me get through it. I wanted to follow your advice and post the whole story on Facebook, but my career prevents me from exposing myself like that. Instead, I sent a folder of my mother's insults and messages to the woman in charge of her church. My mum worked hard to get into that community, which is extremely judgmental. As expected, the scandal spread like wildfire, ruining my mum's reputation in the church and town. My maternal family belittled me for upsetting my mother, but I blocked them all. I found a message from my father, apologising for not being strong enough to stand up to my mum, and expressing regret for missing out on my life. He said he'd divorce her and wanted a relationship with me, but I told him I didn't want to see him or forgive him. His attempt to escape blame by throwing my mother under the bus was pathetic. I blocked him too. Mike sent more taunting messages, which I ignored and blocked. My mum threw herself a pity party for being shunned by her community and for her crumbling marriage, but I just replied, "Good riddance," before blocking her too. My grandpa has decided to stay with us for a while, and he's been a great support. A few days have passed since, and all has been quiet. Lucas is spoiling me. and I'm starting therapy soon. This isn't the dramatic, revenge-filled update you might have hoped for, but it's my reality. I'll let you know if anything changes. Thank you so much for your love and support. I think I'm going to log out now. Goodbye for now. That's all for today. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video and share your thoughts in the comment section down below. Thank you.